Whoever eats my body and drinks my blood will live forever. Today we celebrate Corpus Christi, the day that we remember that Jesus Christ decided to remain with us as a form of bread and wine that later on throughout the Mass and through your prayers become the body and blood of Christ. Now, in the bulletin, for those who will get the bulletin on the way out, I encourage you to open the page, and you will see there is two pictures on the left corner of the second page of what it used to be our Corpus Christi procession, where all of us used to gather to have just one Mass, if I'm not mistaken, that was done by Holy Name, and after that, we will go on a procession. It was a beautiful thing that we used to do. We don't do that anymore. And I do think that one of the reasons why we don't do that is because with time to time, we kind of forgot how important is the Eucharisty for us. How important is to eat and drink the body and blood of Christ if we want to live forever. Now in 2020, there's a lot of things that happened there. Some of us don't want to think about that year anymore. But a year before that, in 2019, there was a study done among churchgoers, and it found out that only 30% of the people who come to church truly believe that the bread and the wine that we offer becomes the body and blood of Christ. Again, it was only 30% of the people who comes to church on a Sunday. Now, this is why the bishops were worried about it. And in 2022, we have the Eucharistic Revival, a big celebration that was done in Indianapolis. Now, another study was done right after that, and it found out that it increased. So from 30%, it increased to 75%. Now, it's a good number, but 75% is still too low. In putting that in a perspective of a family, let's say there is 4 in a family, that means that one of us still don't believe that Jesus is truly present in the Eucharisty, that the bread and the wine are just that. So why that happened? It's because most of the time we, as people of God, have forgotten how important it is to receive Christ every day, to receive Christ every Sunday. And I know that sometimes we fight God's will because it's not our will. And sometimes we don't want to believe what it's easy for us to believe. So and I have a little trick that I used before, because I was one of the one of my family that didn't believe that. So there's a famous philosopher by the name of Niccolo Machiavelli. He wrote a book, it's called The Prince. Now, this is nothing to do with Christianity. On the contrary, sometimes we encourage people not to read it, but I did. Now, Niccolo Machiavelli in his book is telling us that in order for a king to be a good king, he doesn't have to be the smartest in the town. He doesn't have the humble. He doesn't have to have all the qualities that a good king should have. But he can pretend to have that. He can pretend to be the smartest king. He can pretend to be the humble king. In other words, Niccolo Machiavelli is telling us, fake it until you make it. Now, that was his concept for a king, but I want to use that for all of us that are still struggling to recognize the real presence of Christ in the bread and the wine that truly become the body and blood of Christ. So, before we walk into the church, even before we leave the parking lot, if we're still having doubts about it, let us put in our head and say one and more than one time, it is truly the body of Christ. It is truly the blood of Christ. And while we're still in Mass, keep telling that to yourself until you start believing it. that truly the body and blood of Christ are here today. So one day, you don't have to tell yourself anymore, but you will truly believe it. And all of us, the rest of us who still believe that, let us show other people that Christ truly lived in the body and in his blood, showing act of kindness, being good to one another, be forgiving to one another. Because let us remember that whoever eats his body and drink his blood will live forever.